Hi, I'm Nate Adams, author of the Home Comfort Book. And yesterday I had someone ask, it's Keith Wood, asked the question, did you do a home comparison using thermal imaging between the two houses that I blogged about yesterday? So those two houses were very similar, and one had a furnace, one has a heat pump, and I showed that the energy costs were very similar between the two, which you may or may not expect. Uh, so he wanted to understand more about the projects. So what I want to do is just really briefly show you through what our case studies look like, because both of these houses have very, very deep case studies. Um, and I'll show you where the photos are so that you can look through. So an important note about thermal imaging: comparing one house to another with thermal imaging is of limited usefulness. It's kind of like comparing two people medically. There's some similarities, but the critical thing is, where did each person start and where did they go to? So that's a big thing. And also I should mention, I'm kind of excited. You can see the shirt that I'm wearing today says "Electrify Everything." Uh, we, we had these made up custom. You can actually buy them off the blog. I probably won't leave it up super long. This is just me messing around. But since the 1918 House of the Future here is an electrification, and electrification is the way to go if we want to move towards renewables, so where we can do everything in society with wind and solar power and other forms of energy that don't require burning things. Uh, Electrification is the path. So this is available if you have any interest. But that said, let's take a look at the case study, and then I will show you what the photo albums look like, because you can dig through and you can go fairly deep on these things. I purposely made these case studies so that they are basically a TLD, sorry, too long, didn't read, TLDR. Uh, and what my intention is to read the first part, and then if you want to go deeper, there's way more information than you would ever want. So we are big on accountability and transparency, so you will see that shine through here if I did my job well. I spent literally a month writing these things. It's November of 2016. There's 11 of them. So before you ask questions, kindly go and look through these things and dig through, and the odds are you will get your question answered. If you still have a question, just like Kevin did, ask one, and if I have a chance, I'll answer it. Okay, so this is how they work. At the top, I put a pretty photo of the project if I've got one, and talk a little bit about what the project is. So Kevin bought this house in the heart of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, which is a really cool place very close to us here. But the house was wildly drafty, and he just didn't end up falling in love with the house. And so he brought us in. This is a pretty typical thing. We end up fixing people's homes where they love where the house is, they love the backyard, they love the location, but the house they don't love. That's the sort of thing that we fix. He also intends to get pulled out of this house heels first when he's dead, and there's literally a cemetery next door. And this is a really good position to be in if you want to do a home performance project, because these financially don't make a huge amount of sense, just like most renovations frankly don't make sense. If you buy a $100,000 new kitchen, you're not getting 100 grand extra when you sell that house. You might get 40, you might get 60, you might get 70, but you're not getting the whole chunk. You do it because you like where you live and you intend to live there and enjoy the money that you spend. That is when home performance projects make the most sense. So anyway, you'll see there's just another quick little blurb. This box here is the same. I meant this to be very much like a car magazine review where you get the quick numbers. So it shows the year built, how big the house is, how much energy the house used before and after, and what the air leakage in the house was before, predicted, and after. So this is in every case study, meant to be relatively simple metrics. You probably won't be familiar with them, but hopefully you will be after looking at this. And then you'll see we do a summary. problems to solve, what happened afterwards. So we judge our success and failure by how well we did on client objectives. And we did pretty well in this house, but frankly not perfect. There's a lot of issues with the duct system, so the second floor is not as easy to control as we would like. But we had to start by getting the house tight so we could begin to control it. And then it's up to Kevin if he wants to take the next shot at this house. So you'll see results, and then client feedback. So sometimes these are testimonials. Usually I'm pulling them from emails back and forth so that you can see what happened. Like he really liked his comfort levels, doing much better than he used to be. So he was talking about how he had to crank the air conditioner down a lot, and he needed a lot of fans on the second floor to make it work, and now he's not using them. So even though the comfort is not perfect, he's up from something like a 3 out of 10 to an 8 out of 10 on comfort. I generally want to get people to a 9, but we're limited. So every project you do your best, you take a good swing, and you can make a big movement, but sometimes you need to make another step to really get it dialed. And that's where this one is. So I actually like this project, but it's a little imperfect. You'll see reactions like he loved this case study. He just absolutely loved it. This line down here just cracks me up. I will have my great-grandchildren read it to their children after I am buried next door in a foam-insulated casket. He has a sense of humor, as you might have noticed. So then I'll talk a little bit about what the upgrades are, and then this is the important part. So this is a photo album, and these are public photo albums. So if you click these, you'll get the same one that I have open over here. So I'm just going to close that one back up. And you can look through a lot of what happened in the project. So this is the house before, this is the back porch, this is the basement. You can see shots of the blower door gauge. This is the manometer. And so you can get an idea of what the house is, and then I do a fair amount of before and after work. So you can see this was job tested at a 9,000 blower door, 5,000 for the house with the attic door closed, and we got the whole house down under 2,000 with the attic door open. So you can click through these, and there's generally comments on them, and it's meant to be a bit of a story, not unlike this. So once you get below the photo album, there's a full story. And this is where you get into the TLDR. So these get pretty long, but to Kevin's point, here's an infrared image. This is actually a really cool one. It's one of my favorite infrared photos that I've taken because you can see the stairways here. And you can see that there's big heat leak connections through the stairway up into the attic. So the attic is actually the warmest part of the house. And this is pre-project. That was not insulated up there. So it shouldn't have been the warmest. And then you can see other leaks. So this is actually a plumbing stack going through here that was pretty tricky to figure out. So we got it in better shape. But anyway, I really like this infrared photo. And when you go through this, you'll see these things are just crazy long. And I'm basically using the photo album and walking through the project. So if you want to really understand what we did, this is how you do it. And then in his case, we did a fair amount of what we call continuous optimization. So when the project's done, it's not really done. Now we need to take the knobs of the house and tweak them so we get it as good as it can be. And so that's what we're doing here. And you can just see this is a pretty long one. But if you want to know in detail what one of these projects look like, there are 11 really detailed case studies here. So I just wanted to show you what the case studies look like. There's also one for John's house. So you'll see that's here too. These are really pretty similar homes. Okay, so let's talk to Kevin's point about infrared just to some degree. So this is the 1915 house, and you can see from the infrared photos, generally outdoor infrared photos aren't that amazing, but in his case he had some really big leaks that actually showed up. So normally those are not crazy interesting, but they were in this case. There's my favorite one there. Now this is more of what you want to see. So this is a wall in Kevin's house. So this is a 1915 house. You can see that the insulation in the walls is not amazing, and unfortunately this was done with rolled fiberglass and they didn't pay any attention to air sealing. Fiberglass can work, but if you don't seal the cavities that the fiberglass is in by caulking or foaming or whatever you need to do, it doesn't work very well, and you can see that. Like there's a big weakness here, and a weakness here, and a weakness over the window. So I like how this particular setup works. This is called the iron palette. So warm is warm. So you can see here, this is white. That's the warmest part. Or over here, this is getting the white, warmest part of the photo. Purple, the dark blue, is the coldest, and then in between magenta is cool but not necessarily cold. So what you want in an infrared picture is a boring photo. You want everything to be the same color, and that is not what's going on here. And in visible light, this is a picture of the same space. So you can see this is the windows and the wall and so forth. But that is all in here, and you can go look at this album whenever you want. You can join it, and if I add something to it, you'll get a notification. I don't add to these very often, so don't expect a lot from that. This channel and the blog and Facebook are generally where I'm doing most of my work. But you can get an idea of what's going on with these projects. I really like, say, this photo here. This is inside the house. This is a stairway coming up from the first floor to the second, and this is the stairway to the attic, so from the second floor to the third. And you can see it's very cold in there, which it should be because it has a door on it, but that door didn't seal well. This is the attic before we did anything. And then you can scroll through and see more. So this is still part of the energy audit. This is my friend Walter Money, who gave me a hand with this energy audit. You can see this photo here. This is not a great setup for icicles. Snow should really stay on the roof way better than this. So if you see a house that has the whole roof clear, that means there's way too much heat getting in there. This is called the poor man's infrared camera, and this is not what you want to see. You want the snow to stay on that roof. Like this is the neighbor's house at the same time, and you can see his roof kept in snow. That's more of what you want to see. You can see us prepping the attic to get it ready. So there's all sorts of stuff going in here. Now some of these are really fun. So like this is a video of the spray foam in infrared, so you can actually watch the material heat up. And so you can get an idea of what's going on through the whole project. So these are pretty fun. We ended up, because we sealed the basement so well, we made his hot water heater backdrafts, which meant that rather than the fumes going up and out the house, they were coming into the basement, which is a real health problem. If that doesn't burn perfectly, it can be a carbon monoxide issue, and carbon monoxide can kill you. There's not a lot of things in your house that can kill you, but carbon monoxide is silent and can. And I'm an advocate for this because a lot of people in my life have had scares. My mom almost died. My accountant found out that his furnaces were burning really badly and was really thankful that I had recommended an audit. A friend of mine from high school almost died on Thanksgiving. So carbon monoxide is nothing to joke with. So we like using heat pump water heaters, which is what this unit is. And this is all electric, but it has a very similar operating cost to natural gas. But because it doesn't burn anything, you don't have carbon monoxide issues at all. So you'll see the thinking through all of these is very interconnected. There's all kinds of things we're trying to manage simultaneously, which is why we do so much planning in what we do. So let's see here. Scroll down to where we've got, do I have any after infrared photos on this? You know, I really don't have a great deal, so I'll have to pop a couple in here because I took some post-project. You can see, like, here's one where I was testing out the foam job after it was complete. I wasn't able to be there for the last piece of the foam, uh, so I always go back the day after and test, and you can see this blue is where there was a weakness, and that's not necessarily obvious visually, although I guess in this case it was. This was the electrician came in and did some extra work and pulled some of the foam out, so I filled this back in, so we got the house tight again. But this house had quite a bit of work done to it, and I'll add some more infrared photos. All right, this is the 1918 house. This is the one that has the heat pump. And this one, when I did the audit, it was before I had an infrared camera, because you can do a fair amount of work without having one. But then as we were into the project, I definitely pulled in the infrared. So you'll see there's all kinds of things here, like this is us prepping the attic for spray foam. These little tiny bits of fiberglass that are left behind, this really screws up spray foam. It makes it not work nearly so well. You get all kinds of weird voids around them. So you have to pick all of these things off. So we did that. And you can see all kinds of stuff. John is a real goof. So he's been such a fun client to work with. He's turned into a good friend. He's actually working on a documentary about the upgrade process of his house. But he likes to have fun. There's me with the foam hose going up. This is foaming. It's a very tall crawl space in the basement. Where this space tended to get really, really wet. So we foamed it so we reduced how much water could evaporate into the basement. And you'll see project photos as things are done. So this is a very similar project to Kevin's house. We spray foamed the roof. So you can see where we foamed the walls, and then we foamed the roof line here too. So very, very similar projects between these two, which is part of why I put them together. There's a couple of infrared videos in here. And I think to Kevin's question, I don't have enough post-infrared. But here's a couple of things where I like going back after the project if there's a chance, particularly on snowy days, so I can see what happened with ice. And John's house, you can see this one window is leaking a fair amount of heat. But then the house next door has some more stuff going on, particularly the front of the house right here. This was an issue on John's house too, and we got that sealed up nicely. This house, you can see, has a weakness here, but this also could be the sun shining on it. So that's why the infrared photos from the outdoors are not nearly as useful as they are inside. But I'll add some more photos to this. But you can see there's some other things that I was messing around with. This will be easier if you see it in the regular light. So this is a chimney that we took down partially so that John can get more solar panels on his roof without shading. There was a new duct system put in this house, and they ran it basically under here, and you can see in infrared where there's heat leaking from the duct system in the ceiling. And so this is us playing around. Let's see, so we do a lot of looking for leaks. So this here is a rim joist. So this is the top of the basement wall. And this was foamed before we got there. And this is also why you want to do quality control after the fact. So you can see this blue, even though it looked like it was foamed, it was not actually sealed. And getting a good seal is really, really critical. So I touched this up with some gun foam. So it doesn't necessarily look like it's a big deal here, but that's definitely not sealed. You can see where there's a gap there and a little gap over here. It doesn't take a lot to not get a perfect seal. So, that's our daughter. She's home from the babysitter today because the babysitter's sick. And then the other thing you can see is I posted a bunch of energy use shots so you can get an idea. Like when it was 14 degrees out at this time, the heat pump wasn't running full bore. So this must have been a sunny day. And you can get an idea. All of these are dated if you click on them and then click this. You can see February 13th. And so you can get an idea of what's going on in the house. So I'm just trying to be very open and transparent here, just showing what happens. And you'll see that there are a lot of photos of the thermostat as we were learning how things work. So this gives you at least some kind of an idea. Now the last thing that I want to touch on is heating and cooling loads, because these houses are fairly different in this. Let's see, can I zoom in on that? Yes. Fairly different, but pretty similar at the same time. So this is what's called heating and cooling loads. So this is how much, through a program that we use, it says that it's going to take to heat or cool a given house. There's a couple of numbers you want to look at. This required heating equipment output capacity. This is what's called a manual J. It's not exactly a manual J because it's calculated in a slightly different way, but it's close. And a manual J is an industry standard load calculation, so something that's used really consistently. But at this house, it's about 51,000 BTUs. You can see this is how much it takes to heat or cool the individual floors of this house. Now over at Kevin's house, back up out of here. Here is his heating and cooling load. Close that, zoom in. So his house is 57,000. So it does take a bit more to heat this house, but this is where you get into tricky things like what we call real-world load calc. So we like to put different instruments in homes that help us understand what it actually takes to heat and cool the house, so we can verify against this. Now the real number on this is not, so these are the block loads. This is how much it takes to heat the first floor and the second floor. So between the two of them, what is that, about 45,000 BTUs. This is typically much closer to reality when you add the spaces than this number is. And what we can do to get there, there's a couple of different tools. This is an Ecobee thermostat that we put in at Kevin's house. And you can see the green line here, this is indoor temperature. So you can see it up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And then the red dashed line behind it is what the set point is. So he's keeping it, in this case, he has it set to 71 degrees. So down here you can see, 72 is what he has it set to, and 71 is what it's at. Outdoors, this is on this line here, it's very cold, it's 1 degree. But the important thing to look at is down here, these bars. So the light red, this is a 2-stage furnace. Light red is first stage, dark red is second stage. So you can see that high stage was only used when he turned the thermostat up. And that created enough of a temperature difference that the furnace kicked into high. And it pretty quickly jumped the temperature, even though you can see it was still quite cold out. It was like 10 degrees outside. But the key thing is, what we have to design for here is 5 degrees outside. And you can see this line here is about 5 degrees out, and then the furnace actually shuts off for a while. So this is 8 in the morning, so the sun comes out and warms the house up some. And then you can also see this period here is also in the 5-degree range down to 0. So this is what's called design load temperatures. Only 1% of the year are we below the design temperature, which for Cleveland is 5 degrees. So what you're looking for are the gaps here. So if this equipment shuts off, and this is on low stage, so this furnace is way too big for this house, which we knew, but it didn't fit in the budget to adjust the HVAC. The real load on this house. So low stage on this house is I think about 47,000 BTUs, and it's still shutting off. So the real load on this house is probably somewhere between 35 and 40,000 BTUs. When you compare that to the load calculation, that is way, way less than either one of these numbers. So this is how we get confident in putting very small equipment in houses, because they don't need anywhere near as much as you think they probably do if you make the houses reasonably tight and reasonably well insulated, which both of these are. So this is how we figured out what it takes to heat and cool this house. Now John's house is a little bit more complicated. Now the key number to look at here is actually adding these two, the 15,000 and the 12,000. So it's about 27,000 BTUs is what it takes to heat the first and second floor when it's 5 degrees out. Let's get that zoomed out. Now, in the case of John's house, this has a heat pump, and where a furnace makes it puts out the same amount of heat all the time. Doesn't really matter what the temperature outside is. You're in good shape. Heat pumps lose power, they lose heating capacity as it gets cold outside. So this is where I have to look instead. So this is called a balance point worksheet. And this is the heat pump that he has. So this is a very high-end, super nice heat pump. This is by far our favorite. So this is a Carrier, Bryant is the same thing. This is a Carrier VNA 0 or a Bryant 280. And these curves here are what we're looking at. So this is how much heat that unit puts out at various outdoor temperatures. So I know from John's house that it starts losing the war somewhere around 10 degrees. So when it's at night, it'll lose the war, say, at 12 or 14 degrees. During the day, it won't lose the war till about 5, because the sun does help quite a bit with heating the house. But if I know that around 10 degrees it loses the war, I look at what the output of the heat pump is, and it's about 26 or 27,000 BTUs, so we're right in this range here, which means in this case this basically verifies the load calculation for this house. So load calcs they're better for some houses and worse for others, because there's all kinds of things that you can't know about a house, particularly an existing home. I love George Box, who was a great modeler. He liked building models. He said that all models are wrong, but some are useful. So we generally find these energy models and load calculations to be useful, but don't expect them to be perfect. They are not. They're just helping us narrow the band so that we can make really good educated guesses instead of wild guesses. But in looking at this, so I know the house loses a war somewhere around 10 degrees, and the unit is putting out about 27,000 BTUs. So that means this house uses about 27,000 BTUs to heat it at 10 degrees. And that matches up pretty closely with the load calculation on this, which was about 27,000 between the first and second floor. So it gives you an idea of what's going on. So these houses are still really quite comparable. They're not perfectly comparable, but go find two. It's hard to find. They're very close in square footage. They're very close in occupancy. They're very close in year built. The project that we did on them is very similar. So these are quite similar houses to look at. Is it perfect comparison? No, but you won't really find that. So Kevin, I don't know if this entirely answers your question, but I'll add some more infrared photos from the albums so that you can see more of those. And thank you for asking the question in the first place, so I appreciate getting it. So I'm Nate Adams. If you enjoyed this video, kindly subscribe below. You know the usual drill. If you want to get notified when I put one of these out, click the bell and you'll get notified. And then I'll also put a link to Home Comfort 101, which is the first chapter of the Home Comfort book, my book. So if you're trying to solve problems in your house, that is where you want to begin, because you need to at least understand how the house functions. Because if you don't have the right framework around your thinking, the odds of you succeeding in solving problems in the house are not high. You won't get the results that we're getting here for our clients. So please read that first. It's a free download. All it costs you is an email. I'll be posting the link here. And again, thanks for watching. I'm Nate Adams. Have a lovely day. Thanks.